What's up, guys? Brand new Broncos channel. Sam Brown here, host of the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports, a new Broncos only channel that we're starting up. This video is actually filmed on that channel where I talk about 5 potential cap cut candidates for the Denver Broncos. But if you want more content on the orange and blue, be sure to use this link down below, youtube.com/Broncos TV. And without further ado, let's jump on in. Sam Brown here, host of the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports, and today we're breaking down some Broncos cap cut candidates. I've got 5 names in front of me that I'll break down one by one, whether the Broncos should keep them around at their current contract, whether they should move on, and what that would look like in terms of their cap outlook, which we'll jump into right now. The Broncos have just under $15 million in cap space. That's 11th most in the NFL. Obviously, the salary cap this year down to $176 million due to the financial losses and financial restrictions caused by the last year, the COVID-19 pandemic, all that sort of thing. However, with every offseason comes saving money, cutting players, restructuring deals, finding ways to maximize that roster, maximize that salary cap, and put together the best roster of players possible. So we'll break down 5 players, like I said, one by one, and we'll start with the big name that a lot of people have been talking about, whether the Broncos should move on or keep around, and that is Von Miller. Obviously, the Broncos have a $22.25 million club option on Miller in 2021. He didn't play in 2020. Obviously, suffered that torn ankle tendon in camp, had surgery, and missed the entire season. And this is the really big kicker, is that the Broncos have an $18 million cap savings if they cut Von Miller. If they move on, they decline his club option. $22 million is a very sizable option, or a very sizable amount for a 31-year-old who, like I said, hasn't played competitive football in nearly a year. So a very big decision ahead for the Denver Broncos here with arguably the face of their franchise. And I'll ask you guys, should the Broncos cut Von Miller? Y for yes or N for no? This will be the pinned comment on today's video. So just scroll down below this video. It'll be the first comment you see in the section with the Denver Broncos. Should they move on from Von Miller? You can type in Y for yes, or you can type in N for no. I'm of the mindset that you keep Von Miller and restructure his deal. You know, he's too important of a player to the Broncos organization to, I think, move on so suddenly just after one ankle injury. Obviously, with the impending investigation, if things come out of that and legal recourse is needed, that's an entirely different conversation. I'm not going to jump into the details of that too much and what that would mean for both Miller and the Broncos, but he's such an important part of that locker room, such a valuable mentor to young guys like Malik Reed. He was a huge mentor to Bradley Chubb and just a lot of young players on that defense. I think you try and keep Von Miller, restructure his contract, and try and backload some of that salary cap hit over potentially the next 2 or 3 seasons and kind of push that decision back to when Miller's about 33 or 34 years old. I think that becomes a very different conversation then for the Denver Broncos. Okay, a couple players here that I'll kind of breeze through a little quicker because I think the Broncos will likely move on from at least one of these players. First one, Driskel, the backup quarterback, has 1 year, $3.25 million left on his deal. Wasn't fantastic when filling in for Locke earlier in the season when Locke suffered that shoulder injury. Wasn't great, and obviously Brett Rypien now is in the fold, and I'm okay with going with Rypien as the backup quarterback. He's cheaper. He showed me at some flashes. I'm okay with him as a cheaper backup quarterback option to Drew Lock or whatever quarterback option they choose to bring in. The Broncos can save $2.5 million by cutting him this offseason, and I think that's a smart move. It's little things like that that start to add up and start to create more cap space for the Broncos to add a couple value signings, whether it's on that offensive line or in the defense. Next up, AJ Bouye, a guy that a lot of you guys have brought up to me. $11.68 million left on the final year of his contract, the 2-year deal he signed with the Broncos. He was inconsistent in 2020, very up and down year. Had a couple flashes towards the back end, and then boom, gets hit with a suspension. Turns out he's been on PEDs. Misses the rest of the season, dealt with some injuries as well. The Broncos saved the entirety of his contract, all $11.68 million. If they cut Bouye this offseason, I think that's a smart decision for Denver to move on from the veteran and try and bring some youth into the cornerback spot. Next one up, Jurrell Casey, who has 2 years and $25 million left on his 3-year deal. He only played 3 games in 2020 before suffering a torn bicep against the Buccaneers early in the season. And again, the Broncos can save the entirety of his contract if they choose to cut him this offseason or even trade him. They would save $25 million over the next 2 years, which is a huge boost considering some of the pieces that they have now on that defensive line. I'm comfortable with Dre'Mont Jones starting over Jurrell Casey in 2021. I liked what I saw from him. Really came on late with 4 sacks in the last 4 weeks of the season. You roll with him, Mike Purcell at the nose tackle, maybe draft a nose tackle or find a value free agent signing to bolster that position. And then Shelby Harris, if you choose to bring him back, I'm in the mindset that the Broncos should try to bring him back at the right price. And so from then on, you've got a solid front three right there that you can build around. Now, we're going to be doing a lot more free agency videos over the weeks and months to come, so I want you to go ahead and subscribe, join the channel. If you're enjoying content like this, I think we might be the channel for you. We crossed 1,000 subscribers over the weekend, and we're just going to keep on growing, keep the momentum going. We're going to be doing some more drafts, some more free agency stuff over the weeks and months to come. So if you want more of that content, you see the link below the screen, chatsports.com/Broncos TV. Subscribe down below, send that link to some friends, and let's continue to grow the channel. All right, one more name here on our cap cut candidates, and this one's going to be very controversial, but allow me to kind of explore it from a couple different angles. Melvin Gordon, he's got 1 year, just under $9 million left on his deal. Had a solid season. His first season in Denver, was the primary running back for much of the season because Phillip Lindsay had dealt with several different injuries, wasn't really himself for that season. Denver could save up to $7 million, though, if they choose to move on from Melvin Gordon this offseason. And you have to keep in mind, obviously, that Lindsay is a restricted free agent of his own. And so from that point, I think if you're the Broncos, you really are in a tough spot where you may have to choose between one of the two players. Obviously, Gordon was the better back in 2020, played more games, nearly broke 1,000 yards, like I said, also brought more into the passing game, 32 receptions compared to Phillip Lindsay's 7, and got some goal line touches as well. That's why the 10 touchdowns is such a drastic difference between Lindsay's 1 touchdown. So I'll ask you guys right now, pick one to keep, Melvin Gordon or Phillip Lindsay. If you had to choose one, in an ideal world, you would love to bring both back, but it's expensive. That's a lot of money you're committing to the running back position, which you've seen in the NFL has been devalued in recent years. So pick one down below in the comments section. MG for Melvin Gordon, PL for Phillip Lindsay. I think you keep Melvin Gordon unless Phillip Lindsay costs a lot. Now, like I said, he's a restricted free agent, so the Broncos can place what's called a second-round tender on Lindsay, which is about $3.258 million. A team chooses to offer Lindsay more as a restricted free agent. The Broncos can match that, or they would get a second-round pick back from that team in return for Lindsay's services. So if Lindsay goes, and I've said before not to overpay for Phillip Lindsay because I think he'll warrant potentially a bigger contract than you'd expect, I think you keep Melvin Gordon. One thing I want to emphasize, though, is don't go into camp without both running backs. That would be a huge loss and a huge hole in that game. Yes, I understand that the running game is kind of devalued, like I said, in recent memory. But that also means that you can find bargain fits at running back behind either Gordon or Lindsay, whether it's in the draft, finding a value free agent for cheap. I think you need to go into camp with at least one of those two running backs. Royce Freeman keeping around as RB3, but I think you need some continuity there at that position behind Drew Lock under center. So name a player that the Broncos should cut. It's a tough part of the business. Maybe it's a player that I mentioned today, or you have another one in mind. Let me know in the comments who the Broncos should cut. And like I said, I need you to like this video if you want the Broncos to do a 3-round, or if you want me to do a 3-round Broncos mock draft. Like I said, need at least 150 likes here on this video, or the bosses here at Chat Sports said we might have to put you on something else. I want to do some draft. I love doing draft talk, and I want to share that with you guys. So be sure to like this video, and we'll see you next time.